Chapter 181 The Unexpected Visitors. Mia had finally come to accept the reality of her pregnancy. She didn't allow herself to get depressed about things she couldn't change or worry unnecessarily about the man who obviously didn't care for her. The fuss about her being Neil's accomplice had settled down a bit, and since the paparazzi were no longer on her tail like flies, she resumed her daily life. She made sure not to log in to any of her social media accounts after she'd publicly announced her cut-off engagement with Owen, because even in reality, people were calling her names and saying she was a backstabbing bitch for betraying Owen. A lot of fashion house owners who'd do anything to get on her good side by sending her unnecessary gifts every weekend had now stopped, and even removed her name from their VVIP customer list because she'd broken up with the top CEO of their country, who everyone was doing their absolute best to please. However, Mia didn't care about any of that. She'd lived a less privileged life before she became who she was today, and if breaking off an engagement with someone as toxic as Owen would make people turn against her, then so be it. She'd woken up today with a terrible headache. She'd wanted to take a break from work, but her manager had called informing her that she was to come early today because the company head of directors wanted to have a private meeting with her. For the past 4 years, since she joined Talkwave Productions, she'd been the company's favorite host and presenter at every talk show. They'd given her all the privileges to do as she pleased, but after breaking off her engagement with Owen, things had started to change. Even her team was starting to give her cold shoulders, and today when she arrived at the meeting room, the director had looked at her with an expression she'd never seen on his face before, like she'd killed his child. It turned out the head of directors had suddenly come to the conclusion to replace her position as the company's main host with someone else, while giving her a lower position to work as a co-host instead. They'd not thought she was incompetent throughout all the years she'd worked for them, until she decided to break an engagement with the country's favorite. She'd been disheartened but had tried to keep her composure by asking, "May I ask what caused this sudden change without any notice?" And they'd replied with all the recent scandals about you, Miss Harrison, our company's engagement is suddenly dropping. We have decided to replace you with Miss Fanning. Please switch your office with her before the day ends. And now she was here in her office trying to pack her things to switch offices with her rival, Elena Fanning, who would stop at nothing until she'd gotten the face of the production company's host on every television show. If this had happened a month ago, she would have been devastated at losing such a fantastic position. However, after returning from the mountains, she found herself unable to form attachments to anything except Neil, and that was not a positive development. She longed to return to her normal life and focus on work, but recent events had taken a toll on her emotionally. She felt overwhelmed and disconnected from the things she used to love. Lately, she had been consumed with worry, spending sleepless nights reminiscing about the times she had spent in Neil's embrace in the mountains. She couldn't bear the thought of being apart from him, but her jumbled emotions made it difficult to make sense of her feelings. The idea that her current state could harm her unborn child, as her doctor had warned her, prompted her to now consider starting anew in a different country. Perhaps losing her office position was a sign that she no longer belonged here. The notion of leaving seemed outlandish, as she couldn't fathom abandoning her homeland for a fresh start elsewhere. Despite her feelings being hurt, she had supported Neil to the best of her abilities, and now she needed to prioritize what was best for their child. Moving might not be entirely bad, since she had no family ties holding her back here anymore. She'd only stayed back for her job, but now that things had taken a 60-degree turn, perhaps she should better start looking for a good place to raise her child without his stubborn-headed father. Mia sighed as she packed the last item on her desk into the box and sat down on the chair to look around the office she'd come to like in the past 4 years she'd been working in Talkwave Productions. She'd miss it. She'd miss her time with her team and interviewing strangers who'd make her laugh. Subconsciously placing her hand on her flat stomach, she looked outside the glass walls of her office that overlooked the view of the city and felt her eyes sting with tears, prompting her to quickly look away from the outside view. Just when she was about to pick up the box and move to the lower office, a faint ring emitted from the office phone resting on her desk. Acting almost automatically, she answered, only to hear her secretary's small voice on the other end. "Miss Harrison, you have some visitors who are insistent on meeting with you despite my explanation that you are not available. They are refusing to leave, and one of them has even gone as far as to threaten my job if I do not grant them entry," the secretary informed, prompting a frown from Mia as she overheard male voices murmuring in the background. "Inform her it's crucial, and she wouldn't want to miss out on the intriguing gossips we have to share with her." Be quiet, James, you're only making matters worse. Actually, people who work in places like this thrive on gossip to keep their fans entertained. I'm only trying to make us have the chance to meet her since you've obviously forgotten to make an appointment with her beforehand. Mia heard their exchange and felt the urge to turn them away, but her curiosity was piqued by their persistent search for her despite her unavailability. With a sigh, she relented and uttered softly, "Allow them to come in," before ending the call and massaging her throbbing forehead. A moment later, the door to her office opened. She didn't even look up to see who her visitors were as she continued to massage her aching forehead. However, she heard the sounds of their leather shoes clicking on the marble floors, followed by her door closing behind them. For some reason, she expected to see people from the military when she would look up. Thus, she took her time to ignore their presence for a moment, until she heard one of them speak in a polite, gentle voice that coaxed her into acknowledging their presence. "It's a pleasure to finally meet the angel who spoke about my boss so passionately on TV in person. I hope we aren't bothering you in any way," asked James, as Mia's head shot up at lightning speed to finally glance at them in confused astonishment. Her brows frowned upon seeing the two tall, handsome men standing in her office. Her frown deepened when her gaze settled on the other man who stood beside the one who had just spoken. He looked utterly familiar, yet she couldn't pinpoint where she had seen him until he smiled and revealed his beautiful set of white teeth that made his entire face brighten up like a male model on a magazine cover. And then it hit her. He was the one. Liam Thompson, the soldier who had modeled for the front cover of a magazine in a military uniform years ago. He looked even more handsome in reality than she'd thought. No wonder Rain was madly crushing over him in the past. "From that look in your eyes," Liam said carefully, "I hope it means you aren't about to send us out, because if you do that, someone is going to have my head for being unable to deliver his message to you." Mia placed two and two together and immediately realized why they were here. She shot off her chair in a speed that almost made her fall from her sudden movement, but she balanced herself and said, Did Neil send you here?" she asked, holding her breath until she saw him nod his head. Her heart slammed into her ribs. "Please," she said quickly, reeling with shock and excitement as she gestured for them to follow her into her resting room so no one would overhear whatever conversation that would take place between them. Immediately they entered the resting room, Mia blurted desperately, "Is Neil all right?" "As far as I know, he's fine," Liam said as he sat down on the sofa she gestured to. Mia relaxed a little, but it was hard to be a polite hostess when all she wanted to know was why they'd come to see her all of a sudden, and at the same time, she wanted desperately to know how Neil was doing, despite the fact that she'd told herself not to ever worry about him again. "Would you like a glass of wine or some coffee?" she asked over her shoulder as she hung their coats in the front closet of the resting room. "Coffee sounds wonderful," Liam replied, "but there's no need for you to go to the trouble. James can handle it." Liam nudged James in the stomach as he was about to object. Liam could see that she was somehow uneasy and perhaps even nervous with their sudden visit, and recalling Neil's warning to make her feel at ease and not to stress her, he gave James a stern look to get the coffee brewing when James hesitated. James reluctantly rose, shooting a glare at Liam, who was behaving like his superior when he wasn't. It was James who had persuaded the receptionist to inform Mia of their arrival, yet he was the one tasked with making coffee, feeling more like an errand boy, despite coming to deliver Xavier's message to the woman whom Liam had insisted he was not romantically involved with, but was only compelled to care about because she might be carrying his child. Mia was compelled to sit down instead of playing hostess as she had intended, finding herself treated more like the guest. James poured coffee from the maker and served it to her with a smile, which she returned with a somewhat uneasy one. "Would you like anything else with your coffee?" Liam asked, noticing her hesitant smile as she accepted the coffee from James. He was determined to ensure she felt at ease and comfortable, especially if she was carrying Neil's baby, because if something were to go wrong with the baby, Neil was definitely going to have not just his head but his life. No, she trailed off, feeling even more uneasy at the fact that they were treating her like the guest instead of the other way around. Chapter 182 His Message. No, she trailed off, feeling even more uneasy at the fact that they were treating her like the guest instead of the other way around. Mia sipped the coffee to keep herself from asking them why they'd decided to come to her. She knew it had something to do with Neil, but she didn't want to ask them first. However, the longer they sat in silence, the more anxious and uneasy she became. A few minutes passed, and none of them spoke as they slowly sipped their coffees as well, as if to prolong their visit. The room was so silent, if a feather were to fall, it would make a noise. She searched for a conversation to fill the awkwardness in the room, and then she remembered the last news she'd heard of the Thompsons weeks ago and decided to say, "I heard you left the military, Mr. Thompson, because of your father's passing. My condolences, by the way." A friendly smile graced his lips as he said, "Thanks. You can call me Liam, and it's a pleasure to finally meet you in person." He changed the topic of his loss to a more comfortable one for him. "You look even prettier in person, if you don't mind me saying." "No, not at all. Thanks," she smiled with a hint of red creeping up her cheeks, and Liam silently decided that she looked even more innocent and childlike than she was on television when she'd had makeup on. Years ago, before Neil was sent to prison, it was Liam who had dug into her background, and back then he'd thought she wasn't worthy of his friend's attention because of the kind of place she came from. He'd even believed her pictures that were sent to him were heavily edited because it was impossible for a girl from a place like Whispering Way to look as pretty as she was, but now he realized he'd misjudged her in the past. Even Davina, whom he'd wanted his friend to marry, had gone against Neil to follow Jason around like a puppet, but Mia had stood by him and even spoke on his behalf in a press conference. If she hadn't won his approval in the past, she had when she spoke for Neil. However, he knew it was impossible for his friend to love her. Neil had probably even sent him here because he wanted to take responsibility if she were carrying his child. And now he had no idea how to go about asking her about her pregnancy when she seemed like the type to get uneasy and shy quickly. Liam decided to start some small talk that would lead them to the topic of her health, but it turned out terrible. They spoke about unnecessary things that made Mia force herself to engage in for almost 20 minutes before she excused herself to go to the restroom, leaving the two alone. And James glared at Liam. "The hell, man," James said. "If I were Miss Harrison, I'd have sent you out 20 minutes ago. We didn't come here to talk about her body shape and how she looked fatter than she was a month ago. Are you kidding me? No gentleman would say such a thing to a woman." "Damn you, James," Liam fired back with his own glare. "What do you expect me to do? Ask her straight on if she'd missed her period or if she's pregnant? I didn't come here to be straightforward. I was trying to make her say the word by pointing out how she'd changed." "Well, nice one then. Because to me, it seems you are making her silently despise you with how uneasy you are making her feel." "Leave it to me, I will do the questioning," James said confidently as he smoothed his shirt, preparing to ask Mia the only question that had brought them here and get it over with. Liam shrugged. "Fine, go ahead and ask her." When Mia returned from the restroom, James took over the conversation by saying, "Miss Harrison, we came here on Neil's request. I know my question might sound a bit off, but we would like to know if you are pregnant. I mean—" "What?" she interjected, her expression shifting to one of hurt. "Neil sent you here solely for that?" It dawned on her that Neil's true intention for sending his friends here was not because he cared about her, but rather the possibility of him fathering a child and assuming the responsibility. It became clear why they had been asking her probing questions. They were seeking confirmation of a potential pregnancy. The tears she had been suppressing for weeks threatened to spill over, causing her to blink back the emotion. "I see," she murmured, stepping back cautiously to sit down, fearing she might collapse from the overwhelming dizziness. Her head throbbed, and she struggled to contain her anger and revulsion. The coffee she had just consumed churned in her stomach, and she pressed her hand against her mouth to prevent herself from retching or succumbing to despair. Liam noticed her condition and quickly got up while shooting an accusing glare at James for making the matter worse. He'd been trying to avoid this, but James had successfully done the exact thing Neil had warned them against, to stress and worry her. "Miss Harrison," he began to say, but she raised her hand to stop him from speaking. Without looking up at them, she said, "If that's all you came here for, you can leave. I can no longer entertain you. I'd like to go back to my work." She started to rise from the chair, but Liam reached her in 2 strides and grabbed her arm to stop her. She glared down at his hand, then at his face, and he quickly released her, shoving his hand inside his pocket to retrieve his phone. "I know we started off in a very awkward state, but I think it's best you read Neil's message and let him tell you the reason he sent us here. Perhaps his message would do a better job than we've done," he said, handing her his phone. She took the phone with a slightly trembling hand and used her other hand to wipe her face. She didn't know what she'd find in his message, but the thought that it was from him made her excited and nervous at the same time. It's a very long message from what I've noticed, so James and I will leave you alone in here to take your time reading it. We will be in your office, Liam said, pulling James along with him to give the young woman her alone time. He knew that if she were to cry in heartbreak from whatever his friend had written in that long message he'd sent to him yesterday, he wouldn't know what to do but to make it worse. He could bet his life on it that whatever was in that message could never be pleasant as long as it was from his unromantic friend, and he knew the innocent lady was in for a bigger heartbreak. Thus, he'd stay out of the room for as long as he could until she was done crying. After the two men left her alone in the resting room, Mia slowly sank into the soft sofa while staring at the phone in her hand with Neil's contact on its display. All she had to do was tap into the message, but she feared she'd find something that would break her into pieces in the message, and the thought of that made her hesitate. Whatever she'd find in this message would determine her decision to stay or leave the country, and so she took a deep breath and tapped into the message. Chapter 183 I Will Always Love You. Mia braced herself for another heartbreak, expecting Neil's message to tell her she was stupid for loving him when he only desired her sexually. But when she tapped onto the message and began to read, the tenderness and joy that exploded in her heart healed all her wounds from the past month. The world fell away, and all that existed for her were the unbelievable words she was reading, and the man who had typed them to her without ever intending for her to read them. My darling Mia, I know you'll never see this message, but it helps me to type them down for you every day. It keeps you close to me. Damn, I miss you so much. You haunt every hour of my life. I wish I'd never met you as a child. No, I don't mean that. What good would my life be without my memories of you in my teens to make me smile? She read that part and paused. He'd met her as a child? She wondered cluelessly, but then she resumed reading to see what was written ahead. I keep wondering if you're happy now that you are back home with that fiancé of yours. I want you to be. I want you to have a glorious life with him. Because I felt you deserved better, not a man like me who couldn't bring himself to say the words I knew you wanted to hear when we were together. Mia, I'd gone through a lot in life that makes me despise the word you wanted to hear me say, and I was afraid if I did, I'd be like my father. I knew you wanted me to say I loved you, but I couldn't, and I'm sorry I didn't even try to make you feel better. I want you in my life. I want to wake up to you every morning. I'd give up all my life to have 1 year with you. 6 months. 3. Anything. You've stolen my heart since the day I met you in Mirage Mesa as a boy, darling, and you gave me your heart since the day we met again at that rooftop in Ivy Grove. I know you did. I could see it in your eyes every time you looked at me, but I was too afraid of becoming like my father. I don't regret the loss of my freedom anymore, or rage at the injustice of the years I spent in prison. Now, my only regret is that I can't have you. You're young, and I know you'll forget about me quickly and go on with your own life. That's exactly what you should do. It's what you must do. I want you to do that, Mia. That's such a lousy lie. What I really want is to see you again, to hold you in my arms, to make love to you over and over again until I've filled you so completely that there's no room left inside of you for anyone but me, ever. I never thought of sexual intercourse as making love until you. You never knew that. Sometimes I break out in a cold sweat because I'm afraid I got you pregnant. I know I should have told you to abort my baby if I did get you pregnant. I knew it in the mountains, but heavens, I didn't want you to, Mia. I thought of a solution that never occurred to me before. I know I have no right to ask you to have my baby, but there's a way to work it out if you're only willing to keep it. You could take a leave of absence from work and go away. I'll see that you have plenty of money to compensate for what you'd lose from your job and to pay all your expenses. I don't know if my name would be cleared before the baby is born, but if it's not, I'd like you to take the child to my grandma's in Puerto Rico. If you're pregnant and you're willing to do this for me, I'll send someone to make the arrangements to keep you safe. I haven't been in Puerto Rico in ages, but my grandma has never turned away from a responsibility in her life, and she'll see that our baby and you are properly taken care of. She has control of what would have been a very large inheritance of mine. A part of that inheritance will be more than enough to give our baby and you a better life until I'm free. I've decided to send this message to you after all. It's a mistake. I know it is, but I can't stop myself. I have to tell you what to do if you're pregnant. I can't bear the thought that you won't realize there's an alternative to an abortion. The man who gives this to you is a best friend of mine. You are free to tell him anything you want. He's putting himself in jeopardy to clear my name, just as you did. Trust Liam as completely as you'd trust me. Tell him if you're pregnant and what you've decided to do with our child so he can relay it to me. One more thing, I know you might try to argue, but I want you to have as much money for whatever you need or want in your condition. The black card Liam will give you is mine, so there's no point in arguing with him about taking it. Take it. He'll be acting on my instructions, so don't give the man a hard time, sweetheart. I have plenty of money for my own needs, and there's more where that came from. I wish I could say all this to you in person, or that I'd kept one of the other messages I've typed every night so I could send that instead of this. They were all much more coherent than this one. I won't try to call or send another message to you until I'm free, and I don't know when that would be, so don't expect one. Keeping contact will make us both hope and dream, and if I don't stop doing that, I will die of wanting you. Before I go, I read somewhere that you've cut off your engagement with Owen. That's good. Stay away from him. I don't want you keeping contact with him. Get rid of everything he'd bought for you, and I'll make sure you get a new set of everything. And if you dare to think about asking him for anything, or even allowing him to take any little responsibility for our unborn child, I will haunt you for the rest of your life. I like you, Mia. I've liked you as a boy. No, I think I've loved you. I've always did, and I will always love you. Everywhere. Always. Wait for my return. Chapter 184 Lost the Bet. As Mia finished reading the final part of his message, tears of joy welled up in her eyes, blurring her vision. She blinked them away and read the message again, finding it hard to believe that Neil had sent it to her. Overwhelmed with happiness, she cried and laughed at the same time. She was so overjoyed that she didn't notice her tears and sobs had been noticed by the two men waiting for her outside the room. Liam, who had been pacing outside, stopped and exchanged a glance with James when he heard her sobbing. He gave James a look that said, "I told you he would break her heart." James couldn't help but feel sympathy towards the beautiful young woman. If his boss hadn't known her already, he would have courted her and made sure she never had a reason to cry. With her innocent and generous demeanor, any man would feel compelled to protect and keep her safe. However, it was evident that Xavier was not just any man, as Mia's tears indicated that he had indeed broken her heart. "We should check up on her, Liam," James suggested when her voice suddenly went quiet in the room. "She might do something to harm herself in her heartbroken state," he said, already getting up to head to the resting room while silently accepting defeat that he'd lost the bet and would soon be Liam's driver without pay for a year. Damn it. He was going to have to get used to staying up all day and night if he'd become this Casanova's driver. The pair walked into the room expecting to find Mia in her broken state, but instead, she was looking down at Liam's phone with a smiling face. As if hearing them enter, she turned over her shoulder and said to Liam directly, "I want to transfer this message to my phone. Is that all right with you?" Liam, who looked confused at her sudden change of mood, could only nod his head. Then, when she proceeded to send the message to herself, he glanced at James, who was as confused as him. What just happened? Wasn't she crying because Neil probably told her that he had nothing to do with her but the child? If he hadn't heard her crying a moment ago, he'd have thought he'd imagined it from how happy she looked at the moment. "Are you sure Neil sent this message to you and not someone else?" Mia asked to confirm again, because she was still finding it hard to believe he'd sent such a thing to her. It felt like a dream she never wanted to wake up from. He told her he loved her, and that was the part that felt like a dream to her. And when she saw Liam nod his head again, she handed him his phone and told him, "Please read that message and tell me I didn't just imagine he said he loves me." What? Liam was shocked by her words when he accepted the phone, trying to figure out where Neil had declared his love for her. It was hard for him to believe that Neil, who typically avoided showing affection, would express such feelings. This was not the Neil he knew. Good Lord, how could this be true? Neil had actually confessed his love for her, and it seemed like he truly meant it. Mia Harrison was now officially his woman, which was why he had given Liam his unlimited black card to pass on to her and also offered to give her keys to one of his largest properties in Mirage Mesa if she wanted to move. Neil had not said this out of obligation for her child, but out of love for her. As Liam struggled to process this surprising revelation, James's curiosity led him to snatch the phone from Liam's hand to read the message for himself. Unlike Liam, James was not as shocked by the message. Instead, a smug smile spread across his face. "I knew it," he whispered, looking at the woman as she continued to reread the message on her own phone. Then, turning to Liam, he added, "You better be prepared to hand over the keys to that limited edition red sports car you bought last week. That's what I want for winning our bet." With a friendly pat on Liam's shoulder, James returned the phone to its owner. Liam couldn't help but regret betting, because he'd spent a fortune to get that sports car where he'd even envisioned himself driving, only to lose it now. He silently cursed Neil in his thoughts and glared at the smirking James, realizing that 5 years had been enough to change his friend, and he wouldn't have placed the bet if he had known. "How do you intend to clear his name?" Mia inquired, bringing Liam back to reality. "I'm not sure you would want to know, Miss Harrison," he responded. "You can call me Mia," she interjected with a friendly smile, feeling more at ease now that she knew he was Neil's best friend helping to clear his name. Neil had advised her to trust Liam as much as she trusted him, and she intended to do so. "I don't believe Neil would appreciate me sharing that information with you, especially since he didn't disclose it in his message," Liam explained, tucking his hands into his pockets. He didn't want to say anything that could complicate matters for her, especially considering her pregnancy and the likelihood of her becoming Mrs. Galvera once Neil was out of trouble. She rose up from her sitting position. "You don't need to worry about what Neil will think. If I remain clueless about his plans, I'll be consumed by anxiety until the day I eventually find out. That wouldn't be beneficial for me or my unborn child," she stated, deliberately bringing her pregnancy into the topic to blackmail him into telling her more about what they planned to do and how she could be of help to them, rather than go into hiding in another country where she knew no one but Neil's grandma, whom he hadn't met in ages. Liam didn't hesitate to inform her upon learning that he might negatively impact her pregnancy if he kept their plans secret. Neil had not explicitly forbidden him from sharing the information, nor had he granted permission, but Liam believed it was crucial for her to be aware and ready for what lay ahead. "We plan to get another person to confess to the murders," he said. "What?" Mia exclaimed. "Why?" "Because the main culprit is not someone easy to find. The person had made sure to clear every little evidence that would give them away. If we can't find the main culprit, Neil will never be free. He'd spend the rest of his life running away from the authorities when he should be here with us, being him. The only way we could set him free is by getting someone else to confess," he explained. "Additionally, there is no need to fret about the confessor, as they are already a criminal affiliated with Doc Kroll. Further charges will not affect their sentence." "Will that work?" she asked curiously, knowing if Neil were to get free, he would work hard to get his hand on the real culprit, but she feared something might go wrong. "We don't know that yet, and I don't think you should allow yourself to worry about that." Neil wouldn't want that, he advised as he took out a black envelope from his pocket that contained Neil's black card and the keys he'd told him to give to Mia. He then handed it to her. "I guess this is for you." She took it without argument, even though she wanted to argue that she had her own money, but Neil had already warned her not to give the man a hard time. Well, she'd make sure to return them to him as she wouldn't be needing them, thus there was no use to argue. However, a thought crossed her mind as Liam began to prepare to leave. "Wait," she stopped him. "Can I have Neil's contact?" she asked, hoping he wouldn't refuse her even though Neil had said it was for the best they weren't in contact until he was free. She'd die of missing him if she didn't hear his voice. She'd missed his voice so much, she wanted to hear it and know how he was doing. "I'm sorry, I can't give you that. He doesn't have one main contact. He discards the SIMs with every single call he makes. But you can give me any message to deliver to him the next time he calls," he said politely. Mia's eyes fell at that, but then she wasn't willing to give up, thus she said firmly, "I have a message for him. Tell him if he doesn't contact me in 3 days, I will run to Owen and sleep in his arms. And tell him I mean every single word, and I'd make sure I send him the pictures of me doing that as proof." Liam and James's mouths fell open at her words. Was she threatening Xavier now? James thought in disbelief. Xavier might have confessed his love for her, but James bet the love wasn't enough to take away his short-tempered attitude. He doubted Xavier would even give in to her threat if he'd already decided they wouldn't be in contact anymore until his freedom was proven. The man could be a stone-hearted beast if he wanted to, and no amount of threats could shake him if he'd made his decision. Chapter 185 The Call. After Liam and James left Mia's office, she dreamily sat down on her chair and reread Neil's message for almost 30 minutes before she changed her office to the lower office given to her as a co-host. Uncertain about her possibility of moving to Puerto Rico, as Neil had suggested, Mia chose not to let her work concerns weigh her down. Instead, she eagerly anticipated Neil's calls, hoping he would reach out to her. If he truly cared for her, as he'd said in the message, she trusted he would contact her once Liam conveyed her message to him. As the winter sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm orange glow in the sky, Mia grabbed her coat and left Talkwave Productions. Unlike Novaria and the mountains, Mirage Mesa had less snow, making the cold bearable yet still freezing. She walked down to the underground parking lot where the other workers were also heading back home, but the moment she stepped out of the elevator, all eyes turned on her. Some people who were about to get into their cars stopped to look towards her. Some even took her pictures without permission while whispering among themselves. Mia thought it strange that people were giving her this much attention today, but then she ignored it. She thought it must be because the news about her position change had spread in the production company, unknown to her that it was much more than that. As she was getting into her car, she overheard someone say, "I can't believe she still has the guts to show her face in public, she's..." Mia closed her car door, blocking the voices outside. She'd already decided to stay out of social media until everything about her scandal and rumors settled down, thus she'd ignore even these people. Anything that might affect her pregnancy or her mental health would be blocked out of her life, Mia decided, pulling out of the parking lot. Reaching her residence, Mia was already exhausted and hungry. She'd never been the kind to eat much, but for the past few weeks, she'd been craving food more than usual. Nonetheless, she'd been unable to eat well because of her longing for Neil, but now that she'd heard from him and knew how he felt about her, she decided to cook a homemade meal by herself. It had been a long time since she'd cooked in her kitchen. 5 years. And now that she felt like a load of weight had been lifted off her shoulders, she wanted to act normal at home and forget about all her problems for the first time. Despite having numerous concerns on her mind, such as the strange incident that had occurred in the storeroom 2 weeks prior, where she had fainted and awoken with no memory of why she had passed out, she was adamant about not returning to the room out of fear of a similar experience occurring. She decided to set that aside until she had a clearer picture of where her life was headed. After a brisk shower and changing into comfortable home attire, she entered the kitchen intending to listen to music while cooking. However, before she could do so, her housekeeper approached her with a worried expression. "Miss Mia," she began, her tone filled with concern. As Mia turned to face her, the housekeeper continued, "Sir Owen called to inquire about you when you were not home. He seemed lost and heartbroken. Could you please consider speaking with him, even just once? I have nothing to discuss with him, Sabrina. Owen and I are no longer together. I understand your loyalty since he brought you here to work for me, which I am grateful for, but I have no desire to continue the relationship. I would appreciate it if you refrain from answering his calls in the future," she stated firmly to the housekeeper, who was in her late 30s. Sabrina had been introduced to Mia when she'd first climbed up the social ladder and had just bought her house in one of the most expensive cities in Mirage Mesa. Owen had brought the housekeeper to her, and at first, she'd found the woman to be a little noisy until she'd come to realize it was just her nature. But what Mia didn't know was the fact that Owen had brought the woman to keep a close eye on Mia, and who she allowed into her home and spoke to. Sabrina had noticed for the past month that Mia had been acting depressed, where she barely even touched her food, but tonight she'd suddenly decided to cook by herself, something she rarely did. She'd even noticed her throwing up yesterday morning, which she'd reported to Owen, and he'd said Mia does that at times when she was stressed. But he'd asked her to keep a close eye and see what she did at home. Sabrina didn't know why she was ordered to do that, but she was willing to do her best to get some information that might impress Owen. "Miss Mia, do you need help with anything in the kitchen?" Sabrina asked, just so she could stick around and keep a close eye on Mia like she'd been ordered to. "No, you may leave," Mia said, unsuspectingly as she took out a pan from the cabinet. However, Sabrina wasn't prepared to do so. She looked around for random topics to fish out information that might be useful to Owen. I noticed you were throwing up yesterday. Are you unwell?" Mia stopped, turning over her shoulder. She said, "You saw me throwing up?" That had been in her bathroom where she was sure no one was in the room, but now her housekeeper had proven her otherwise. The last thing she wanted was her pregnancy being known to the world when the father of her child was still a fugitive. She didn't want anyone to know about it yet, not because she cared what they thought, but because she didn't want her child to be tainted with bad rumors. "No, I didn't see you. I heard the sound from outside your room when I was passing by," Sabrina said. Then, as if recalling she had something to do, she added, "I will be in the laundry room if you need me." Then left. Mia stared at the woman's departing back for a while before she resumed to do her thing in the kitchen with a little frown between her brows. 2 days had passed, and yet Mia had not received a call from Neil, nor had she heard from Liam since the day he had left her office with James. Feeling a bit under the weather, she had stayed at home for the past 2 days. However, she now felt the urge to go outside and get some fresh air. She decided to take a stroll around her neighborhood to clear her mind of the constant overthinking. Mia had been overanalyzing everything, starting to doubt if Neil truly cared for her as he claimed. The only thing that kept her believing in his love was his message, which she had read repeatedly, committing every word to memory. She even found herself sleeping with her phone clutched to her chest, longing for his presence. Mia was aware that overthinking was an unhealthy habit she needed to break, but she couldn't help herself. She'd considered driving to Liam Thompson's house, but the constant paparazzi following her every move prevented her from doing so, always ready to turn her actions into headlines. The rumors surrounding her relationship with Neil had elevated her fame to a level where she longed for her old life before she went to Novaria. Mia walked the streets of Shellington Villas, where her house was located, until she could no longer continue. The winter wind was picking up, and her coat was not thick enough to shield her from the cold. Deciding to head back home, she hoped Neil would reach out to her soon before she'd go insane overthinking why he hadn't. If he didn't, she knew she would have to find a way to contact Liam. The phone call Mia had been waiting and hoping for came at the last place she expected to receive it. Immediately after she got back home, and was about to walk to her room. "Oh, Miss Mia," Sabrina called out when Mia walked by her in the kitchen, "Mr. Bennett called you on the house landline last night when you were asleep, and I forgot to inform you about it." Mia glanced up a split second before the name hit her, and when it did, she froze. "What did he say?" she asked, alarmed by the breathless desperation in her own voice at the realization that Neil had called her using his disguise name in Ivy Grove. "He said something about wanting to talk to you about some media matters. But I told him you were asleep, and I'd never wake you up for such a reason. He then got angry and called me useless, then ended the call." "Why in heaven's name did you tell him that? Why didn't you just wake me up?" Mia exclaimed in frustration, but she kept her voice calm so as not to disrespect the housekeeper who was only watching out for her. "I said that because I heard that you don't want to be disturbed by any media people. Anyway, he called back a moment ago and said he needed to speak to you urgently, and when I told him you went out, he cursed at me again and hung up. He should have called your personal number if he wants to speak to you urgently, but he seems to be a demanding, short-tempered man. Do you know him?" In a flash, Mia realized Neil was being cautious of calling her personal number in case her phone was tapped by the authorities, that he hadn't gotten through to her when he tried 2 times, and that he might not try again. It was all she could do to keep her frustration and temper from lashing out at the lazy, nosy housekeeper. If he said it was urgent, Mia shot back with an uncharacteristic fury. "Why didn't you call my phone and tell me to come back?" "Well, Mr. Owen had warned me when he assigned me as your housekeeper to not disturb you with any calls unless it's urgent and unless it's from him." "That was urgent. I pay you, Sabrina, not Owen. You work for me, and I have the right to know if someone needs to speak to me," Mia said, her nails biting into her palms to control her anger. She could fire the woman at this point of her anger, but then she knew it would be cruel of her to do when the housekeeper probably had no other means to feed her family but to work here. "Did he say whether he intended to call me back again?" she asked, gentling her voice. "No,